Did you know that humans are getting shorter? What does bacon and eggs have to do with the CIA successfully overthrowing the government of Guatemala? Which country has a life expectancy of only 14 years old? Learn the stories behind these and so much more in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. I've avoided calling myself a progressive or a leftist for a few years because I started to become really disillusioned by the constant appearance of phenomena that I always thought the right did on the left. All of this stuff, yes, it does happen on the left. People just, for some reason, they pretend it doesn't count if they do it. There's just the incredible amount of bigotry. I was talking about a popular figure with somebody and they said, oh, well, they're a right winger. And I said, this person's entire career as a lawyer has been for social justice causes. Like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, that person thinks January 6th wasn't technically an insurrection, so they're a right winger. I said, how can that possibly work? What are the minimum qualifications that automatically make you right wing? And they said, you're right wing by your weakest link. So it literally just takes one heterodox opinion on one thing, and then you're a right winger. And by right wing, I mean you're wrong and bad. There's been this incredibly stupid drama on TikTok, and maybe some of you know about it because it caused Destiny to join TikTok and then get into these back and forths with some of these creators. A big part of what happened in that movement and what I've seen in a lot of places is, you know, a person, a black person, a Hispanic person, a woman, or whatever, what they do is if you criticize anything that they say or something about them, then what they do is they say, oh, you are racist toward everybody in my group. They say, I am black people, or I am Hispanic people. An attack on me is an attack on everybody, which is just insane bigotry. Mind you, these people, they're forced to pretend that people that look just like them don't have contrary opinions to them. Like, they have to pretend there's no such thing as a Trump voting black person. If you point that out, you get called a racist, tokenizer, or whatever. And meanwhile, they don't engage with those people. They're terrified to, because then it destroys their narrative that I am all minority people's opinions. There is absolutely racism on the left. The people who just openly flaunt that I am anti-white. The way, even before the election happened, that black men and Hispanic men were preemptively being thrown under the bus by the narrative of, oh, well, they just won't vote for a black woman. That's the problem. And then that just extended to everybody. If you didn't vote for Kamala Harris, you are a racist. There is sexism on the left. Just the other day, I saw this super viral post, and it was making fun of male suicide. And it said something like, when it's time to take a moment of silence for the male suicide epidemic, and like they were playing sirens and the person was screaming and stuff. I mean, all of the dozens and dozens of top comments I saw on that with thousands or tens of thousands of upvotes were all saying that the numbers should be higher. And then there's the constant race to the bottom for the fight over, you know, who is the most oppressed group we can come up with. And how can we convince everybody that the society we live in is fundamentally bad at every level? Which is just literally not true, and it also guarantees that you'll be a political loser forever. Here's a really hilarious example of that.
Let me hold your hand when I say this. We do not move to America because we think it's a better country. We move here because it's a little less worse than our other countries. Because you're stupid to think that we moved to this country for some hot dogs and some baseball. We just move here because we are looking to make more money and offer a better chance for our families. Did you know that the minimum wage a day, not an hour, a day in Mexico is not even 15 American dollars? Not even 15 American dollars. Right now with $15 in San Diego, I could go maybe buy a matcha and half of a granola bar, honey. If you support ICE, you support people getting destroyed. If you support families getting destroyed, I hope you rot in hell. And I will see you there, babes.
I'm going to show you this other video, and this encapsulates not everything I've been talking about, but a number of really important things. Just listen to what this person says. It's just unbelievable.
May I ask, so I live in the neighborhood,
Sure.
And I have come to the CVS very often. May I ask why you called the police on those two men?
CVS policy dictates that if they're shoplifters, that exit the store with merchandise unpaid for,
Yeah.
you should get the police involved. And if the police apprehend them, we issue a barring notice.
Okay.
So I actually did not elect to press charges. I said, hey, look, I just want them to know they can't come in here anymore because they shoplifted, and I just need them to sign that, and I need my merchandise back. And the officers obliged, and the guy said the same thing, thank you, and they left.
It's not your merchandise, it's the store. So you know what happens when the black men or black people, and you decided to call the police on two black people that allegedly took something from the store because you're willing to uphold the policy, and they could have lost their lives.
We can agree to disagree on this because I don't work for you, and I follow my company's policies, not your policies, where I can appreciate your concerns.
So you're willing to risk someone's life for what, $30,000 a year?
There was no risk, in my opinion. Thank you. You have a great night.
What is your name?
My name is store manager.
No, what is his name?
No one's going to tell you my name when you're sitting here videotaping us so that you can try and elicit some sort of violence against me. It's not going to happen.
Elicit violence against you? You just elicited violence against two black men by calling the police on them.
We got to walk away when one of them had a warrant and could have been arrested, and the cops still let him go.
Just listen to yourself. You work with black folks. You just remember that.
So whatever that is, I'm not that. And so I started getting disillusioned and stopped labeling myself as like a progressive or a leftist or whatever. But, you know, I forgot to remind myself that the internet sucks, and I've falsely attributed what's being fed to me as a representation of the way things are. So, for example, lately with the LA protests and riots, you know, there have been videos of those Waymos being lit on fire. As far as I'm aware, exactly 3 of those vehicles were ever lit on fire. But if you see dozens or hundreds of videos of it, then you get this false sense that it was bigger than it really was. This also takes us back to the summer of 2020. Yes, fires were started. Buildings were burned. A lot of buildings were burned. But people still to this day say that that Minneapolis was burned to the ground. I mean, how stupid can you be? Well, I guess I can be that stupid sometimes. I am a progressive. I'm a very left-leaning person. Nothing else captures what I believe in, and I'm not going to let idiots poison a good idea and a good label. Now, I will also make fun of people on the left because I make fun of everybody. So it's taken a while for us to get to the point here, but I don't know, that's how I chose to set it up. So with respect to DEI and me being against it, I sort of logic broed my way into it. Now, Charlie Kirk is against DEI, and being in favor of anything that Charlie Kirk is against, that's a pretty good litmus test, but you have to do better than that. You can agree with somebody even though you have completely different reasons. Nick Fuentes and I both think that the AIPAC lobby should not exist. I don't really think any lobby should exist. But obviously we come to that from radically different positions. The way I reasoned myself into being against it was that I thought it wasn't meritocratic, and I think a meritocratic society is a noble thing to pursue. The basic logic of it goes, you lower your odds of picking the best candidate when you specifically say, well, we're going to choose from smaller subsets of the population. So, for example, if you say, well, we're only going to hire women this quarter. Okay, well, that's only half the population. So the idea that out of all the people you hired, you picked the best one has shrunk by quite a bit. if you say we're only going to hire black women or whatever, that's 6 or 7% of the population. So you're almost guaranteeing that you're not getting the best candidate. Now, being blind to selecting people for a position, that's really important. And being blind has actually done quite a lot of work for the progressive movement. So, for example, this is a pretty famous example. You probably know about it, but blind auditions for orchestras, that raised the number of women in orchestras by massive numbers. The auditions were always done in front of a panel, and the panel thought they were being unbiased, but they weren't listening to the music, they were judging the person, even if, for all they could tell, they weren't doing that. So in this case, the blindness of the audition actually did promote the best, most qualified people, and it increased diversity at the same time. Now, funny enough, there's something that's happening, which is some cities feel that orchestras aren't racially diverse enough. So they're saying that the blind audition is either discriminatory in some way or it doesn't go far enough. So they're basically looking for affirmative action. Now, I'm not against affirmative action because otherwise a problem can become sort of perpetual. So if there are even fewer, for example, Hispanic violinists in the population, proportionally, right? So take whatever percentage of the population is Hispanic. Okay, now what percentage of all violin players are Hispanic? Maybe it's a lot lower than the general population. Well, I can pretty easily see how they would never get a shot. They're an even smaller representation, and so it could end up being this weird thing where, I'm using a very specific example, which is odd, but let's say they have like 5 candidates and they really can't tell the difference between any of them. So they just, by blind chance or whatever, they just pick one of them. Well, when the one group is always just a small representation, through basically bad luck, they can just continue to not be represented. Another reason for deliberately selecting for at least some amount of diversity is, well, we can look at a historic example like women or people of color not being allowed to go advance education or higher education. So a long time ago, you could have said, well, they're less educated. And that would have been true because society was set up to keep them out. And so you probably have to start with some sort of affirmative action type of response. Because if the system is set up that they start off in a less privileged, in this specific example, less educated state, and we're supposed to select people to go into these institutions, a university or whatever, based on merit, well, the system has front-loaded people at a disadvantage. You should purposely select for representation to get the ball rolling on the progress here. One thing that I still feel, I've talked about it before, I'm very much against the identity politics and the tokenization and the whole look at me movement that the left does. I think another thing is before DEI was even an acronym that people talked about, the well kind of got poisoned for me with Kamala Harris just being told, Biden was just told, you need to select a black woman for your vice president. And so the one who did absolutely atrocious and couldn't even win her home state and told Joe Biden on the stage, your racism personally affected me, just said, oh, okay, I'll be your Veep. Talk about not believing in anything. And then Karine Jean-Pierre, oh man, that idiot was just so should not have had that job. Another thing is when companies change their logos on Facebook to virtue signal, it happens every year with Xbox, and it's currently happening now because it's Pride Month. So these corporations, they do the look at me type thing. Meanwhile, their CEOs are doing everything they can to pay their employees as little as possible and to pay into the tax system, for example, as little as possible. They are some of the biggest hurdles toward social justice, but they trick people with their PR. And politicians do this exact same kind of shit. Funny side note, For, like for years, hardcore right-wingers, they've been attacking Target specifically for like gay stuff in the aisles, and when they started doing plus-sized mannequins in their stores. I don't know how many of you remember this, but I remember lots of lefties and communists during the summer of 2020 saying, yeah, I hope every single Target in the entire country burns down because they pay their employees a shit wage. It's just kind of funny how Target catches it from both sides. And something I will continue to remain consistent on, even though I've changed my mind on this particular issue, is if you could somehow demonstrate that an organization implemented DEI for the purpose of excluding one group, probably white people or white men, I would absolutely condemn that. And that kind of thing has happened. Harvard got sued. It wasn't over white people, it was over Asian people, but that was deserved. So how did I unconvince myself of this? Well, I just re-remembered things that I know. So, for example, with respect to meritocracy, which is pretty much what all this is going to be about for me, we know that the school you go to is not a predictor of lifetime success. One of the best predictors is actually how wealthy your parents are. So there's no merit in any of that. It reminds me of Suits, which is a show I've actually never watched, but I have seen clips of the very first episode. The kid didn't go to Harvard, but he's a whiz. He's the best lawyer. But the firm says, well, we only hire people that went to Harvard. Credentials can't always tell you who is most qualified. We are not robots. Humans, we don't have specs. We have intangibles. Now, I guess we do kind of have specs. But I think probably the most important thing about us are those intangibles. I don't think that's limited to just the way we live our social lives as social creatures. I think almost no matter what you're trying to do, be the president of something or just a mid-level or low-level employee, the intangibles about what make us human beings are important. And you can't measure those intangibles. No matter how we try to assess that, you just can't get any kind of guarantee that you're getting the right person. Like a example that's so obvious it just screams out loud to me would be, Tom Brady being the 199th pick in the draft. Sports is just so clearly one of the most merit-based things. It's literally a competition. It's a game, and the goal is to win. And he's the best that there's ever been. Tom Brady absolutely deserved to be the 199th pick. They had nothing to go with to say otherwise. And yet, look what happened. This is kind of another tangent, but I actually often hate it when some sort of tragedy, it depends on the situation, but when something wrong happens or a tragedy or whatever, and they just immediately fire the person that was in charge and then they replace them with somebody, that oftentimes really annoys me. Now, if you can prove that it was due to gross negligence or it was their fault, then yeah, get rid of them. But I think in a lot of cases, that's just another PR stunt. And then are you going to replace them with somebody who has never gone through some adversity, who has a squeaky clean record, meaning that they don't have experience? Yeah, that kind of tends to be what happens. We learn more from our mistakes. Another thing that we know is that really brilliant people are being left out. I would really highly recommend checking out Malcolm Gladwell. He turned this series of podcasts into an audiobook. I don't know if there's a print version of the book or not, but it's called I Hate the Ivy League. And episode 3, I believe it is specifically all about how kids in lower socioeconomic statuses in this country, and we know who those tend to be, don't get the opportunity to go to these elite level institutions, even though they have the merit. It's also the statistical fact that the smartest person who ever lived can pretty much promise you've never heard of them. It almost certainly wasn't Einstein or Newton. I mean, it might have been John von Neumann. But considering there have been 107 billion humans that have ever existed, the smartest person who ever lived, probably nobody ever heard of them. They were probably very poor. They might have lived like 5,000 years ago. The point with that, and the fact that brilliant kids are being left out, just proves that incredible talent that isn't given an environment and an opportunity to grow and foster is just being wasted. Well, where's the merit in that? One of the most damning things is I don't have a problem. I'm talking about colleges a lot here, but this obviously extends to like the political atmosphere and the business atmosphere. But there are, for like Ivy League schools, for example, there are students who pay full tuition, and that's one of the biggest reasons why they get in, even though there are more qualified people. Their parents can write a check for full tuition. And I don't have a problem with that. But that's not meritocratic. So if I don't have a problem with that, then it's hypocritical if I have a problem with the other. I remember a long time ago, I read this article, and it was Google released their hiring like demographics statistics or whatever. I don't know why they do that. It's just something they do. And the article was lamenting about how unfortunate it is that half the people that work at Google are white. And I remember thinking, how is that unfortunate? If society were perfectly equitable and more than half the population of the country was white, then you would expect those kinds of numbers. To me, that's just some of that basically soft leftist bigotry of, oh, that's too white. Now, if the company was like 90% white or something like that, I would look at that and I would think, yeah, I don't know about that. And what do you do about that? Well, there's no such thing as the right answer. I talked about demographics earlier, and I don't know if that's the right answer. It seems like the fairest answer. If we look at any really large institutions, whether it's the business world or schools or politics, well, in a state that has a very large black population like Mississippi, much bigger than the overall nationwide average, and I don't know the numbers, but if the number of black people in the Mississippi state legislature was half or a tenth what the actual demographics are, then that's not right. Now, should it just be exactly what the demographics are in every institution, depending on the global or local level of analysis? Again, that seems intuitively the most fair, but I don't know if that means that's the right answer. And even if it was the right answer, how do we implement that? Well, I don't know. But what I do also know is we know that unconscious biases exist that cause underrepresentation. And nobody knows what the solution to that is either. I doubt there even is such thing as the solution. But we should try. And even though the people that say the right-wing argument of, oh, you want more women in STEM, but you don't want more female bricklayers. Well, they do have a point. No, I think secretly the reason they really say that is because they just want power and control and to reinforce the status quo. And also, I mean, those people are paid to say what they say. Nothing is more astroturfed than these right-wing grift platforms like the Daily Wire and PragerU and Tim Pool. I mean, they literally can't exist organically. I think some of them are going bankrupt, but they're subsidized. Their business model is billionaires are going to make them millionaires to pay them to tell lies to create enough outrage content to get people to support the politicians that are going to give them tax breaks. That was kind of another tangent, sorry. But the only question that matters, I think, is what kind of world do we want to live in? Now, nobody knows the way to get there, but some of us are trying, and others are clearly blocking. Fuck those people. Thanks for watching, and you'll see me tomorrow.